All right, let's just dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to be decoding a deeply ingrained psychological phenomenon that honestly affects absolutely every single one of us. I want you to think of your mind as an incredibly advanced operating system. Most of the time, it runs totally smoothly, right? Executing tasks, processing data. But as our source material today reveals, there's a fundamental glitch in this machine. It's a flaw in our cognitive software that actually drives us straight towards self-sabotage. The material uses this brilliant, highly clinical systems optimization metaphor to break down the glitch. And the best part? It offers a fascinating protocol to actually fix it. So let's explore it together.
Listen to this because it hits right at the core of what we're talking about today. It wants and seeks certainty, even if it is not in our best interests. I mean, it begs such a fascinating and, frankly, kind of terrifying question. Why do we actively destroy our own success? Seriously, why would someone just burn down a perfectly good relationship? Or, intentionally derail their diet by eating an entire pizza just because the scale didn't move that morning? The answer isn't that we actually want to fail. No, the answer is that we want to escape the anxiety of ambiguity. The human ego is absolutely terrified of the unknown, and as you'll see, it will pay literally any price, even the price of total failure, just to buy a little bit of certainty.
Okay, that brings us to Section 1, the ego's certainty trap, diagnosing the glitch in the machine. See, because our ego lacks the bandwidth for nuance, it has this desperate, completely binary need for extremes. It wants to be perfectly high or completely low, totally secure or entirely ruined. It basically forces us into one of two really dangerous polarities. The first extreme is what we can call the comfort of the bottom. And this explains one of the deepest paradoxes of human behavior. Why do people willingly cling to chronic limitations or past trauma or financial stress? Well, because if you accept that you are completely broken, a permanent victim, you achieve absolute certainty. The bottom might be a dark cage, but it's a super comfortable one because there's zero risk of trying something new and failing. Then on the other end, we have the illusion of the top. When you achieve a massive victory, your ego instantly tries to cement it, convincing you that you are this unkillable god. But that high is just as dangerous. It blinds your prefrontal cortex to new vulnerabilities, pulls your focus entirely away from daily execution, and it sets your whole system up for a catastrophic, unmanaged crash. At the end of the day, both of these extremes are really just hiding places.
Moving right along to Section 2, sabotage in the middle, the counterintuitive trap.
So, what actually happens when we step out of those comfortable extremes and try to build something new, or optimize a system, or change our lives in some meaningful way? Well, this is where the agitation phase begins, and the ego starts to seriously fight back. You enter what's called the gray zone. At the beginning, you have phase 1, the start, which is usually fueled by all that great initial motivation. And eventually, you hope to reach phase 3, the final adaptation, where the results are fully locked in. But right there in the middle, that's phase 2, the volatile 30-day field test. Whether you're building a massive enterprise or just changing your biology, the absolute most productive phase of any system optimization happens right here in this terrifying, unverified middle terrain. The data is shifting, the outcome isn't guaranteed at all, and the timeline is completely open-ended.
And it's exactly that volatility that triggers existential panic in the human mind. The ego simply cannot predict the exact landing coordinates of these scenarios. Just imagine you're building an asymmetric enterprise, right? Your capital runway is completely unverified. Or maybe you're sitting in the middle of a high-stakes negotiation, and both sides are just dead silent, just waiting for the other node to flinch. Or perhaps you've drastically changed your fitness routine, and your shifting biometrics sends your system into shock. In every single one of these specific scenarios, because the final answer is being withheld, the ego starts sounding the alarm bells. It screams that something must be terribly wrong, simply because the situation is unresolved.
So, to stop this intense anxiety, the ego actively forces a premature conclusion. Think about it. Have you ever intentionally started a completely pointless argument just to blow up a relationship simply because you couldn't handle the uncertainty of where things were going? Or maybe you've dropped a strict, highly effective training protocol just to go back to a comfortable, unoptimized baseline. Or executed a terrible business trade just to close the position and stop obsessively watching the charts. We do this because, and this is wild, we actually prefer the certainty of a closed, broken loop over the terrifying, open-ended volatility of our own potential. We will literally seek out harm just to get a definitive answer. Which brings us to the solution. Section 3. Command the gray zone, installing the sovereign equilibrium protocol. If we know for a fact that our natural hardware is bugged to seek premature certainty, then we have to manually install a cognitive software patch. We absolutely must learn to treat our own human emotion with cold, objective detachment.
To patch this glitch manually, our source material lays out a fantastic high-level roadmap for navigating this middle ground. It's a three-step process. Step 1 is labeling the panic. Step 2 is fundamentally changing the language you use. And Step 3 is elevating all of this from a personal habit into a generational legacy. Let's break these down one by one.
Okay, Step 1. Halt the system and automate a strict cognitive air gap. The very next time you're hanging in the middle, maybe you're waiting for a critical medical diagnostic panel to come back, or you're tracking a really volatile market correction, and you feel that aggressive, almost physical urge to just hit the self-destruct switch so you can get it over with, you must literally halt the system. You have to actively insert an air gap between your emotional urge and your physical action. You stop everything and you look directly at the urge.
And when you look at that urge, you deliver this clinical mantra to yourself. This is my ego begging for the cheap narcotic of certainty. I refuse the injection. We will sit in the gap. The sheer power of labeling this panic in real time with total cold detachment, it cannot be overstated. By calling out exactly what the ego is doing, literally begging for a cheap narcotic, you strip away all of its power over you. You realize you aren't failing, you are simply experiencing a craving for resolution, and you are actively choosing to sit in the gap instead.
That brings us right to Step 2, continuous variable calibration. Now, this one is huge. It requires you to ruthlessly purge extreme binary adjectives from your daily operations. You have to strip away the emotional narrative entirely and keep your internal feedback loop completely dry. We're also incredibly used to telling dramatic stories about our days, aren't we? Labeling business quarters or workout sessions as epic triumphs or complete disasters. But that extreme language is exactly what feeds the ego's binary glitch.
Think about the difference between binary ego vocabulary and continuous variable calibration. Let's say you have a heavy lifting session and your velocity is totally off. The ego immediately wants to scream, "This is a terrible failure, I'm getting weaker." But when you calibrate your language, you look at that exact same event and calmly say, "This is a data point requiring a microadjustment. It wasn't a total disaster, it was an acute recovery deficit indicating you just need better sleep or a different fuel allocation." Do you see how this slight shift completely neutralizes the emotional panic? You stop reacting wildly to your life, and you start simply calibrating it.
And finally, Section 4, the Horizon Commander, decoupling from egoic polarization.
You see, this protocol isn't just some quick productivity hack. It is a foundational blueprint for true mental resilience that can actually become a legacy. Think about passing this code down to the next generation, especially a young person facing the high-friction terrain of youth, a time when capability hasn't quite caught up to ambition and their ego is constantly tempting them to just quit. The directive here is not to offer them false comfort. Instead, you impart this piece of wisdom. True strength isn't having all the answers. It's the unshakable capacity to outwait the chaos until the terrain updates on your terms. You urge them to reject the lazy trap of needing an immediate answer. Because the crowd out there, they're like fragile puppets just being danced around by their desperate need for comfort. They need to know right this second if they are winners or losers. But the sovereign mind rejects that fragility entirely. You just keep executing your daily protocols in the dark and you let the timeline do the compounding work for you.
By doing this, you completely decouple your life's trajectory from the frantic, energy-wasting traps of egoic polarization. You cease to be this hyper-reactive mercenary getting buffeted around by the highs and lows of cosmic randomness. Instead, you transform your mind into an unassailable, deep-sea anchor, completely stable, profoundly quiet, and entirely capable of moving through the absolute most volatile, ambiguous coordinates of reality with complete and unadulterated mastership.
So I'll leave you with one final thought to close out today's explainer. Ask yourself honestly, the very next time you find yourself deep in the gray zone, feeling that overwhelming pressure to just get an answer, will you force a premature move, or are you ready to stand perfectly still in the absolute middle of the storm? The choice and the mastery is entirely yours. Keep learning, keep calibrating, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.